guys, Tash here, and this is Ian from Bondi Behaviourist and Canine Caregivers. We're together today to set you up with a little bit of content. So by way of introduction, for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm from Learning Ready Behaviour Services. We are based in Edgecliff and we work with children. We work with children who are neurodiverse or children with additional behavioural needs or perhaps have been given a diagnosis of some kind or maybe who have a disability. We work with them and support them in their home settings, here in our clinic, which is in Edgecliff, and sometimes in other areas in the community as well. We provide mobile behaviour treatment for the kids that we work with. Ian, if you'd like to tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a behaviour consultant for dogs and I work across Sydney, and with Canine Caregivers we've got an online learning platform as well. And we work with a range of issues right from the beginning of the dog's life through puppyhood through to major behavioural concerns that people might call us with. And something we work with often is families and their dogs, and that's why today was a really great opportunity to talk to you and provide some hopefully valuable information.
Yeah, amazing, cool. So something that nobody would know about us is that that's actually exactly how we met, as two separate professionals working in somewhat similar fields but very different fields. So I'm a board certified behaviour analyst, and I decided to adopt a dog, and it was actually a dog with pretty significant needs, additional needs that are on top of those that you would imagine when adopting or taking care of a dog. And so long story short, we found Ian, which was fantastic, because even myself as somebody very well versed in the science of behaviour and learning felt completely out of my depth in how to look after this animal and how to help its life, her life, feel as enriched as I wanted it to feel, and how to do it well, basically, which is kind of what brings us together today. We're two professionals who are very passionate about science, about what is evidence-based in our practices. We're passionate about providing support and advocacy for individuals, humans in my case and animals in Ian's case, but who perhaps don't have a voice of their own or who are learning to develop their own voice. That's definitely what shared passion that we both have as professionals, and why I thought it might be great to come together and discuss some considerations for how to do that well, how to adopt a dog into a family and do it well. In particular, in my case, into a family that has a family member who has some kind of additional needs of their own. So how do we navigate that field? How do we do it in such a way that makes sure that everybody in the family is heard and cared for and their needs are met?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you can definitely speak to is how there's times where it can be extremely challenging, but nobody's born with that inherent kind of know how to bring a dog into the world and meet its exact needs. It's not every single situation is different and individual to that individual, but there's some principles and frameworks that we can go through today that definitely will help you along the way in learning how to navigate the entire situation.
Yeah, great. Amazing. All right. Well, we might dive straight in. I've got a couple of questions and things that we'd love to dive into and consider
And this is going to be a bit of a conversation today. It's not going to be a hard, fast, you must do this, but these are all hopefully just start that conversation, isn't it?
Right.
Let's get that dialogue going, get a thought process going so that we can be critical thinkers.
Yes.
And just thought provoke and get some good stuff going.
Right, and then from there into the future, there is support that's available. There's support that's out there. Ian and his team are developing so many different frameworks and avenues of support in different models and different modalities. There are so many options. Obviously, myself and my profession, there's so many options for individualized, tailored support that is right for you and your family, and particularly you and your family's animal, your family's dog. So, this hopefully can spark those conversations and lead you into different avenues in the future. Cool. All right, so first question. what do we do about breed? What do we do about age when we're thinking about what dog do I think is right for my family?
Okay, it's definitely important to consider them because they have a major impact in terms of the dog's overall behaviour. There are certain things that will happen that are completely appropriate for that individual dog that are breed traits or age-related behaviours.
Right.
And so understanding if we're looking at the breed, understanding what is the lineage, what is the heritage of that breed, what was the breed purpose, and more importantly, or at least as importantly, not just what it was bred for, but then what behaviours have been reinforced for generations to be able to achieve the task that they were bred to do. Because they're going to come out, they're going to be expressed, and without an appropriate outlet, you're going to get frustration. But without guidance and clarity for the dog, they may well get expressed at what we might deem inappropriate times, even if it's appropriate to the dog.
Okay.
The same could be said with age-related behaviour. So we would expect young puppy and adolescent dogs to express sometimes quite explosive or irrational behaviour because they're still learning how to navigate the world. So we have to put into place the necessary outlets for the dogs, parameters in the environment to set them up for success and limit the chances of failure according to what is very likely to be expressed and what would be, from the dog's perspective, be considered extremely normal to be expressed. Okay.
So this, I imagine, ties into level of activity that the dog is likely to need and to engage in, whether we want it to or not. How do you think that might impact a family, particularly a family who are also caring for, looking after somebody who has additional needs of their own?
It's going to be a factor in the sense of something that we are all short on is time. And if we can't invest into meeting their fundamental needs, then we're going to have all kinds of issues crop up, because a lot of one of the big misunderstandings with dog behaviour is they're not coming from a moral compass, they're not trying to be right and wrong and good and bad. The dog's behaviour is based on, or is an expression of how they feel at that time. So when I'm looking at a dog's behaviour, what I'm looking at is what are you communicating that your needs are at that time? And so if we are looking at a dog whose exercise needs aren't being met, or if they are a dog that demands high levels of companionship, or on the other extreme, they actually need to be able to relieve that and go away often, but they're crowded all the time. You will see the dog communicate that, and often that's when what gets labelled the unwanted behaviour, the bad behaviour, the barking and the agitation.
When it was really just a basic need that maybe wasn't being met.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So how does that then link into engagement levels? Because I think about young children, there's a lot of different, I think, stereotypical assumptions about what dog ownership might look like. And I think about my dog and what engagement needs she has, which are very different, I think, to probably what my assumptions maybe might have been. So does that tie into, in terms of how independently does this dog want to behave and engage? Do they want to sit by themselves in their crate, or do they really love being out amongst the people with the noise and with the pats and the cuddles?
It's so important to respect the individual. There's no right or wrong way of doing it, but what you have to do is respect the individual. And like you just mentioned there, actually taking a step back and probably pulling ourselves and our own wants of that dog out of the equation, because as you said, that preconceived idea of what your dog might like, you might think that you're giving it the best life in the world because that's what you thought he might enjoy or she might enjoy.
Mm.
But if you're not actually listening to the dog, it's not reinforcing at all, it's not enjoyable, it could actually be punishing, which could in itself be quite a problem.
Right, big problem. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think about this a lot as a behaviour analyst, but as a dog owner and a dog lover, that you have to become really good at analysing, observing and analysing, and not assuming, not kind of being taken away with your own emotions or your own desires out of that relationship with that animal, but really having a look and seeing, well, what's the dog's behaviour telling me? They're obviously not vocally telling me anything, so what can I learn from their non-vocal behaviour?
And if they are telling you vocally, that means that we've missed a lot of the more subtle cues, because that's when they're shouting.
Right.
Literally at that point, there's normally been a lot more more subtle cues that would have been telling us all along, that we may not have picked up on. So understanding our dog's body language can be a game changer in terms of just addressing things nice and early, and it helps everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And they're things that I think I didn't know about and think about prior to adopting a dog that really needed me to be thinking that way. And I think as a behaviour analyst, I'd always thought as well, why can't I help teach this animal to learn different things, this dog to learn different things? And I think it's just, a matter of knowing who you're working with. And that is something that I carry through my own practice with humans, with little children who, I think it's so important. But then when we link up to this, to dog ownership in a family, I think it's very important that we know how to read, what to look for, what to read, how to read it, how to interpret it.
Yeah, I think when we look at dog behaviour, one of the things that we see often, and I see often in my profession, is people mistaking hyperarousal or overstimulation for excitement. If the dog shows it but then can settle, you probably are looking at the dog was excited and it was able to regulate and then soothe itself. But if we start to see that happen over and over again and it isn't able to normalise the situation, we're still seeing the big overt reactions, then it's probably not coming from a place of happiness. It may well be coming from a place of discomfort, whether
Stress.
that's stress, physically, emotionally, or mentally.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. What else have I got here for you? What about if my child has a lot of really particular sensory needs and sensory enjoyment, and maybe they enjoy making a lot of loud sounds, or maybe they enjoy being in their own certain space that's a safe space for them, or maybe they have other needs altogether, such as environmental needs, like mobility related things. Maybe they are in a wheelchair and they need their wheelchair to get around everywhere that they go. What are some of the considerations that I could make to make sure that all of those things can still work for my child, and that they will all remain within, that they're going to be things that work for my dog as well?
There's two simple principles that we can ask people to kind of be aware of, and they will help them so much. Okay. One of them is set up an environment, so access to those situations or denial of access in those situations, so that you can actually take effective control without having to constantly supervise. Something as simple as a baby gate, not necessarily for the human child, can be a game changer just in allowing, if it's closed, I can concentrate on this. Making sure that whenever we do that, we build the dog's positive association of gate being closed, positive association so it doesn't just feel that every time the gate gets closed, it gets abandoned. But that's a simple, just managing the environment first and foremost, so that you set yourself up to succeed. Okay. And then the other one, and I really use this a lot in pretty much everything I do these days with my work, is think about the patterns of what is the dog predicting when that happens? So say, for example, the child starts crying and introduces a high level of volume. What does that mean to the dog? Because if we get flustered, if we rush too much, and the dog is very concerned about the situation, that pattern, baby crying, becomes a precursor for concern for the dog. Whereas if we can be conscious about that, and I understand it's so hard, but as often as possible, go, baby crying equals a calming, soothing atmosphere to a point, as best as you can for that situation.
Right.
Predictability for the dog, that it doesn't just equal something negative. If the, say it's a child in a wheelchair, maybe we ask the dog to have their own safe space so that there's lack of risk of injury. So if the wheelchair starts moving, teach them a place and teach them, if you go here, everything's going to be okay. And what we're doing there is giving the dog clarity in their own mind, so that they're not just scrambling around and worried about what might happen. It's not always about making the situation good, unfortunately. That's not real life, is it? But sometimes just by saying, hey, when this happens, if you go over there, or if you do this behaviour, you're going to be okay, and then we get through that, and there's going to be a degree of stress in the dog's life, but you can make it so much more manageable by those two simple things.
Okay, great. I think about things too, like teaching, helping support your child, whether it is a child who's neurodiverse or a child who's neurotypical. Teaching children to interact appropriately and suitably with dogs goes a really long way as well. And it's something that I've done before and really enjoy doing. And it's possible, you know, to teach children to understand, however they best understand it, what will make their dog happy. So obviously the adult caregiver needs to know that first, and then be able to impart that for the child. And I think a really big one, this is a bit of a side note, but a really big one for me is teaching children to ask whether they can pet somebody else's dog.
Yeah.
It's a really big one as well.
Yeah, and that body language, when even just asking to pet can actually be a little bit too intrusive for some dogs. It's, can we let the dog say hello? Because if the child is, or anyone, adults too, are willing to engage the dog, the next step is to ask the dog, are you also willing? Not to just walk in and pat them.
Yeah.
Because then we're entering a healthy dialogue. Hey, would you like to? Not, hi, I'm going to do this. It's, you're going to start the relationship off on a much better footing by approaching it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in industries where consent and assent are very important, I think that maybe interacting with animals is right at the bottom of the list, where it's less important, you know, which is absolutely unsuitable, and not what we should be striving for at all. And another reason, again, why we're coming together is to be able to navigate that and educate and communicate about that, and get us doing a little bit better practice overall.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's see what else we haven't covered. I have a question here, and kind of relates to some of the things we've discussed, but what kind of environment do you think, what kind of those environmental adjustments might you be looking at making? Are you talking about, so baby gates, maybe crates, or an area that's the dog's area? What about where they eat? Are there things that we would consider around those things?
Yeah, definitely. Every dog's different. Okay, so some dogs really don't value certain resources like food or personal space as highly as others.
Right.
But as soon as one does, then we need to respect that. We're not going to build that dog's tolerance levels by constantly testing them. And so if we've got an individual that prefers to be fed separately from the family, afford for that and allow for that, and make mealtime's meant to be the best part of the day.
Yeah,
make it
me.
exactly. And so we make it as comfortable as possible for them. I think one of the misconceptions, or myths out there that people do is they try to, well, force the dog almost, like to comply to human norms, which is we eat together.
Right.
It's not necessarily the case for our dogs, and the same could be said. A resource for the dog, the way we term it, is the resource is anything that the dog values at the time. So it could be anything, physical possession like food or a ball or a toy.
Yeah.
It could be, it could also be personal space. It could be something as simple as a blade of grass if that's what it values at the time.
Right.
And we have to apply context, because there'll be times when potentially our dogs are more tolerant, say of pets and others coming into the space, but there may also be normal times that when they're resting and sleeping that could be completely appropriate to the dog to ask for distance, especially if it's not getting it.
Right.
So setting up parameters in terms of your environment, going back to the actual question, sorry, I got distracted there, but trying to form a relatively strong routine and pattern for your dog as best as you can. You know, when I say, I don't mean a rigid one, I don't mean like feed your dog at 6 every morning. If I aim to feed my dog in the morning, that's good. You know, and then potentially, you know, having some sort of pattern so that your dog again can have predictability. That way you can kind of use that as a stabilizing point in your mind as to what are my dog's needs at this time. So if I know roughly when he wakes up, he might need a wee, then he might need to eat, then we might need to do a little bit of engagement and exercise. I'm just putting these in any sort of order, but by having some sort of plan, I can, as things come up in my day and my dog starts to communicate and everything starts to happen around me, I can use that as a reference point. What would my dog normally need at this point, and then how do I meet their needs? And it helps me problem solve.
Okay. So I'm getting a lot of predictability being important.
Yes.
And I think it comes down to that also for the child, for the children, or for the person who has additional needs in particular. I think that person being able to learn that the dog's behaviour can be quite predictable as well. And again, depending on the individual, what their needs are, how much they clearly understand language versus understanding based on experiencing things with the dog on a routine basis. But I think at the end of the day, predictability is safety, and it's reassuring, and it can help everybody kind of relax into the relationship and relax into the interactions, knowing that it's not likely that we're going to have these big blow-ups because we've been fairly well prepared.
Yes. You beat me to it there. Foundation creates a perception of safety, and one's perception of their own safety is the foundation of their behavioural health. And that's what we explain to people with dogs. Like, ultimately, you know, I think going back to our stereotypical norms that you brought up earlier, a lot of people put emphasis on exercise, but we see a lot of people compromising the dog's sense of safety to get them physically fit. It doesn't, and then we see behavioural concerns because we know, well, your dog doesn't feel safe in that environment. But then that conversation that we often have to have with people is trying to change the understanding that your dog would rather feel safe than go for a run. For one example.
Okay. All right, so let's finish up. I would love to hear your top 3 tips, top 3 things to consider that families can take away with them and take into future considerations for maybe adopting an animal.
Yeah, I think, well, one of them might be a surprise, we've covered it a lot, is manage the environment, be proactive, so that you give them the best chance of setting them up to succeed, everybody up to succeed from the start, and create your patterns. But the element of predictability, so that everybody can have at least something to fall back on, even if it starts to just go a little bit pear-shaped.
Okay, great.
The second one would be have a support network around you, whether that's friends, family, or professionals. There's a number of services out there for a number of different needs. Having the support around you just means you're not in there alone.
Yeah, which I do find very important. And I mean, in the field of work that I'm in, I think community is extremely valuable. And I think when I think on a personal level with my dog guardianship, is that I think without Ian's support and without support of friends that we met along the way and family and things like that, it would have been more challenging. It already was quite challenging.
Yeah.
But it would have been more challenging, so community goes a really long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third one is just try not to compare your situation with others too much. Wishing that it was too much like something else that isn't the reality of the situation you're actually in, and it allows you to embrace the wins that you've got, but it also helps just not put yourself in a situation where you just feel bad about yourself, because you really, you've got wonderful individuals in your care, and there's so many good moments, even though there may be some tough ones. And even with a healthy dog, we see people all the time compare, oh, I wish my dog could, instead of just loving the individual in front of them.
Yeah.
That's my 3 tips.
Great, amazing. Well, we hope that was really helpful, some helpful things to think about. Thank you very much for your time, Ian, much appreciated. And we'll see you guys soon.
See ya.